Hey everyone, welcome to The New Populist. I'm Dave Brown. If you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Now, yesterday I put out a video talking about the US involvement in Ukraine over the last 15 to 20 years. And right now, the establishment narrative is that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine for no reason. It was unexpected. He's just a bad guy. Perhaps he's suffering from some sort of mental issue that he impulsively decided to invade Ukraine. And nothing could be further from the truth. When you dig into things deeper, you see that he had a calculus and that this action was not only predicted by the US, we were kind of pushing for it. And so in that video, I showed how even in 2008, George Bush was talking about bringing Ukraine into NATO. We were giving them money. We were involved in the overthrow of their government, and we pushed certain people to be running that country after that old government fell. And we have been intimately involved in their process over the last several years. And this whole narrative that they were this new democracy that was being bullied by Russia and we were just the good guys trying to help them isn't quite the case. Now, I have an article here from 2015 in the Washington Post. Now, remember a lady named Fiona Hill? Fiona Hill was a witness during Donald Trump's first impeachment hearing. She was on the National Security Council. She is an expert in European and Russian issues, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. So she is a well-established member of the establishment. She's not a whack job. And she wrote an article with another person. I think his name was, let me get it, Clifford Gaddy. He was also a Russia expert, basically saying that the US's actions were going to goad Putin into some sort of military action against Ukraine. And this is in 2015. So I want to read this article because I want to demonstrate to you that we knew that our actions were leading to where things are at right now, with Russia actually having invaded Ukraine in 2022. And my contention is this might have been part of the plan. We wanted to push Putin to take this action so we could further isolate him and hurt him economically, militarily. And at some point, our dream is regime change. And even right now, there's this alleged report saying that Putin might be overthrown next week and that he's cracking down because he's worried that he might be on the way out. Is that true? Who knows? But let's go through this article, and she really just spells it out. Everything happening right now, they knew about in 2015. So Washington Post article, opinion, and the title is How Aiding the Ukrainian Military Could Push Putin into a Regional War. The United States is on a dangerous trajectory in its relations with Russia, a nuclear superpower that believes itself to be under direct threat. Several former U.S. officials and top think tank experts released a report calling on the West to provide military support to Ukraine. The logic of sending weapons to Ukraine seems straightforward and is the same as the logic for economic sanctions, to change Vladimir Putin's calculus. Increasing the Ukrainian army's fighting capacity, the thinking goes, would allow it to kill more rebels and Russian soldiers, generating a backlash in Russia and ultimately forcing the Russian president to the negotiating table. We strongly disagree. The evidence points in a different direction. If we follow the recommendations of this report, the Ukrainians won't be the only ones caught in an escalating military conflict with Russia. In the jargon of geopolitics, Putin enjoys escalation dominance in Ukraine. Whatever move we make, he can match it and go further. In August, when it looked as though Ukraine might rout the rebels, Putin increased the stakes and countered the Ukrainian military. Drawing on those lessons, some Russian security analysts are now pushing for a preemptive invasion of Ukraine, arguing that Russia should go all the way to Kiev before the West takes further action. One recent such plan suggested that Moscow was losing momentum in the conflict and should not waste more time on fruitless negotiations. The Western press coverage of the issue of lethal weapons can only convince those in Moscow pushing full war and invasion now that their approach is correct. We also must consider the effect that arming Ukraine would have on our European allies. The report has created an uproar in Berlin and other European capitals, stoking concern that the Obama administration will take steps others are not ready for. If Putin concludes that transatlantic unity can be shattered, with the United States facing the possibility of going it alone in Ukraine, why would he change his course? Our problem is that we do not fully understand Putin's calculus, just as he does not understand ours. In Putin's view, the United States and the European Union and NATO have launched an economic and proxy war in Ukraine to weaken Russia and push it into a corner. As Valery Gerasimov, Chief of Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, has underscored, this is a hybrid 21st century conflict in which financial sanctions, support for oppositional political movements, and propaganda have all been transferred from diplomatic tools to instruments of war. Putin likely believes that any concession or compromise he makes will encourage the West to push further. I want to stop right there for a second. Isn't that exactly what we've been doing the last several years in Ukraine? Giving them weapons, encouraging them to confront Russia. We have our non-governmental NGOs, the non-governmental organizations funding certain things in Ukraine. We have the children of the elite in Ukraine working for gas companies. We are intimately involved in Ukraine, intimately or aggressively pushing them to the West. And this is essentially what they're talking about here, this economic warfare, using sanctions, using propaganda, supporting political movements, opposition political movements. Here they're saying that this is, in their viewpoint, an act of war against Russia in lieu of actual war. So this is what we've seen the last 5 years, and we're seeing it ratchet up even more right now during the actual invasion of Ukraine. Let me continue. Anyone who argues that Putin's wartime rhetoric is a bluff is making a very risky assumption. We should bear in mind the wars that Putin has waged in Chechnya and Georgia. Before Putin came to power during the first Chechnya war, the Russian military collapsed, the people balked, and President Boris Yeltsin's government negotiated with the Chechens. In the second war, Putin put his intelligence service in charge and convinced Russians that the sacrifices were worth it. The war was brutal and the military and civilian casualties high. There were no negotiations. Then in 2008, Putin called NATO's bluff on Georgia. Some reasoned that if Putin knew Georgia would eventually become part of the alliance, he would refrain from moving against it militarily. But the West wasn't prepared to fight for Georgia, and Putin was. Since Georgia, Putin has prepared the Russian military to fight a regional war behind the ultimate shield of Russia's nuclear arsenal. And he has spent a great deal of time and money telling his people that he is defending the Russian nation in Ukraine. His past actions suggest he will do everything he can to convince them that real Russian military sacrifices in Ukraine are worth the cost. The delivery of lethal U.S. weapons to Ukraine would help Putin make that case. They will be part of the proof he needs. We face a huge challenge in devising a strategy to deal with Russia that does not fuel this escalatory cycle and puts Ukraine on another path. We also need to draw bright lines around transatlantic unity and work to preserve it. It is hard to find effective alternatives to the current sanctions policy. But if we plunge headlong into sending weapons, we may lose our allies and we may never have the opportunity to get things right. So, clear as day, 2015, Fiona Hill, member of the National Security Council under Trump, saying here, if we arm Ukraine, if we give him weapons, we are basically giving Putin the tools he needs to convince his government around him that invading Ukraine is the right thing to do before things advance to the point where Ukraine is no longer, they're no longer able to invade Ukraine because they're too built up or became a member of NATO. So the 2015, they knew about it then. And so I will once again say that anyone thinking that we were surprised by these actions in Ukraine, the evidence shows the exact opposite. The Pentagon, the foreign policy makers, they have been planning this out, waiting for this reaction from Putin. They were warned if they did this, that this would happen, but they did it anyway. And here we are. And now, if you question anything that's going on right now, you're called a Putin stooge. You're called a Russian shill. And they want no one to ask questions or to dig in and show them the things that they said themselves. It's all there. The internet is forever. And right now, we can all go back and just look at all the articles and all the clips from the news over the last 15 years. And we can see that their entire narrative on what's going on right now in Ukraine is BS. They expected this war. I think they wanted this war. And I think they're actually salivating at the chance to really have Ukraine sacrifice itself to weaken Russia and to allow all the corporations and all the Western powers further sanction Russia, isolate it. And I think at some point, they want to overthrow Putin and eventually down the road bring Russia into the Western system as part of sort of that European U.S. access. And Putin and Russia, they don't want that. And this is the result. They go into Ukraine and they're trying to fight to preserve what they think is their own hegemony there in Eastern Europe. So we'll see how things turn out. Unfortunately, this looks to be a long, bloody conflict. No one's giving up. We are escalating things. I think we're actually allowing now planes to take off from Poland and to fight Russians. So we're going to further our NATO involvement, and where this leads, who knows? These are dangerous times, and of course we are antagonizing a nuclear power, and if that happens and things get too far, who knows what may happen, and that could be global disaster. So we'll have to see what happens. That's it for now. Again, if you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.